The guy said, okay, I have two options. I put a bullet in my head, or I join the Legion. The only two famous Indians, the people who did the best things for the perception of India, are Mowgli and Bhal Singh. So Canada has a worse perception of India than Pakistan. You will have much more coverage for a train accident in India than the G20. For the French government and for the French corporation, India is the pretty girl in the room. Of all the guys I met in my life, the most scary people I met in my life are these people. Some mind tool to understand the world, to understand psychological warfare, the war narratives, destabilization of nations.
Welcome to the podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
So you're going to be contributing geopolitical analytical content to the channel, to my channel, on a regular basis. So could you please introduce yourself to the audience? Who are you? What's your background? What's your expertise?
Sure. I'm Ram Divedi. I'm a professor of geopolitics. My specialties are asymmetric warfare, destabilization of nations, how to create narrative psyops operations. I'm a professor for 13 years in the French military school in a division specialized on intelligence called EGE. We can talk about that later if you want.
Mm-hmm.
I was the first Indian to be a student in that school. I live in Delhi, but I go to France 4 times a year to teach over there in the military school. And I also have some businesses. I help French people to invest in India. And I have a company making drones, military cars, bikes, batteries. So we have a lab in South India. And we have a factory also. But everything I do here, it's under an organization called Kutniti Foundation. We are right now in the headquarters in Delhi of this foundation. And basically, there are a lot of great think tanks in India. I know most of them and they do fantastic work. But me, I wanted to have something which is not inside India, more something about topics outside India and operational. So we are doing many operations right now. And we can talk about them later if you want.
Okay, so what is the focus that Kutniti Foundation has? What are the focus areas?
There are many. One, for example, is I'm working on a strategy about how to win the Olympic Games in 2036. In 2009, I was a student in the last year in France, and the Minister of Sports of this time, David Douillet, he was a gold champion in judo, came to us and asked 48 agents to organize a strategy of France for Olympic Games. And France won the games, and it was just happening a few months ago.
Yes.
So you see, you need to prepare that amount of time before. And the funny thing, you will say, yeah, okay, but why the Sports Authority of France ask intelligence people to do that? Because winning Olympic Games is public diplomacy. It's nothing about sport. It's not about how you build stadium and everything. It's how you create a narrative, how you counter the other participants, because at the end, there are few players who want to get the games, and there is one winner only.
Okay.
We have one thing where we monitor all the press in the world, mentioning India. So I can give you every day the perception of India in the world, in Brazil, in China, in Russia, in US, wherever you want. Because if you don't measure a problem, you cannot take any action. It's just a concept. So I'm doing that, and I have the strategy about how to change the perception of India in 1 year.
In 1 year?
Yeah. I'll make a video on your channel just about that, about how to explain step by step to the people, how you can change the whole perception of India in 1 year. And it's nothing you can think about. Whatever you have in mind right now, it's not that. It's very, very different.
Okay.
We have something about we want to create a legion in India. So I know if you know about the Frank Throwing Legion. So we want to replicate the same thing in India.
So let's talk about perception.
Yeah.
How are you measuring the perception that other countries have of India? Which countries are we looking at, first of all?
So we monitor 23 countries.
Okay.
All the nuclear powers, main trade partners of India, Quad members, so the 23 major countries in the world. And basically, it's quite difficult. It's not very straightforward to analyze the press because there are no tools for that. So we build tools in-house. So we have a full system, which is a bit complex. I won't go deep inside that. So we have multiple engineers who build the tool every day. You met them. And basically, for these 23 countries, we get all the major newspapers of those countries. And every day, we extract the articles mentioning India. And then we have moderators by hand every day who read the articles and grade the articles.
Okay.
We would love to do it with AI. We never cracked that thing right now because in articles, you have a lot of sarcasm and complexity. Journalists are very good at writing. So I'm sure AI will do it one day, but today doesn't work yet. And then basically the moderators for each article, they grade the article if the article is negative towards India, neutral or positive.
Okay.
Right. And we put some other tags like, is it business? Is it about society? Is it about politics? Is it about tech or whatever? Then you gather that for each newspaper, then for each country, then for the world. So if I give you, for example, for this month in the world, we have 72% of the articles written in the world about India that are negative.
Negative.
Yeah.
72%.
Yeah. Okay, about problems.
Okay.
And for sure, some of these problems are absolutely true. I'm not saying at all that India is a perfect country. They talk about pollution in Delhi. I live in Delhi.
It's a fact.
It's bad. It's a fact, you know?
Yeah.
And in fact, there are not a lot of fake news, but there are a lot of things that are cherry picking. For example, you will have much more coverage for train accidents in India than the G20.
Okay.
We were so proud last year to organize the G20. No one talked about it in the world. Like it was like not covered at all. Right?
I see.
Then we got 18% of articles that are neutral. They just give a random fact that something happened in India, but without any flavor, I would say.
Okay.
And 10% of the articles are positive.
Just 10%.
Yeah. In the world, 10% these months of articles about India are positive, which is at the level of Somalia. We are a free country. We have problems. It's not a perfect country. It's fine. But when you start to have newspapers who write, especially in countries like US or Canada or UK, who writes every month about India for 7 years, and the percentage of positive article is 0, it's called propaganda. The other way around would be true also. If someone was writing only positive articles, but it never happened. There is no newspaper in the world who does that. So yeah, it's just called propaganda. And you can see there is no real freedom of press because it's very dependent on the geopolitics. I'll give you an example. The perception of Canada 3 years ago was not very good, but not horrible. We had some issues with Canada recently. It went to the worst country in the world right now. Yeah. So Canada has a worse perception of India than Pakistan.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So that's what we do, and it's very important to measure.
So that's how you measure. You can quantify what's happening month upon month, and also on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a lot of background in France. How is the perception of India in France?
As a country or in a specific topic?
Oh, let's start with country. As a country, how do French people see India?
Honestly, people don't know much India in the rest of the world. I think a bias that Indians have is a lot of Indians travel the world, but they always go in the same countries.
Okay.
UK, US, Canada, Australia.
English
the same countries, the Anglo-Saxon mindset.
Yeah.
All part of the Five Eyes, if you know this network.
Yeah.
And then there is few Indians in the super modern city-states like Dubai or Singapore.
Yeah.
So for sure, it's a part of the world, but it's a very small part of the world. Indians don't know much what happens in Europe, Africa, South America, some other parts of the world. And like I grew up in France. We are a very small community. I know all the Indians in France. We all know each other.
Okay.
Because at this time it was just few families. And then there is a Pondicharyan diaspora. Mostly when I was a kid, no one knew about India. The only two famous Indians, the people who did the best things for the perception of India, are Mowgli and Dal Singh.
Fire!
That was the only reference I had when I was younger.
I see.
And now, there is not, people don't know much about India. And it's very difficult for them to believe that India is growing and developing and everything. There is a huge gap of perception between what's happening here in India. Again, not everything is perfect, but still we are a very fast-growing economy.
Yes.
And we are improving year by year on various indicators. They start to realize about China now. Like the European, they start to think that China maybe is not that bad.
Yes, that's how it is. Yeah. And what's the perception of India from the perspective of the French government, the military, intelligence, and so on?
So for the French government and for the French corporation, India is the pretty girl in the room.
Okay.
Because the population is growing, purchase power is increasing year by year. So for most of the French companies, it's a good, way to make money, which is totally fine.
Why not?
If you look at a French company like Decathlon, they sell more in India than Nike, Adidas, and Puma together.
Decathlon has cracked India, haven't they?
They cracked India.
Yes,
I know them quite well. Very smart people. And in fact, no one knows, but the headquarters of Decathlon, which is in Bangalore, they cover almost all Asia. Behind. Yeah. So, and they manufacture a lot in India also.
Okay.
I think 50% of what they manufacture is manufactured in India. The problem of all those companies is they never advertise on that. The French or the Germans or all the Europeans, they have the mindset of they go to a country, they make money, they close the door behind them. You see? If you ask Decathlon in France about India, they'll say, oh yeah, I think we have a shop over there.
I see.
You see, it's that vibe, or they won't, say, yeah, India is great, everyone should go there. They say, I found some gold mine. I won't tell anyone about it. Why should I? When it's not smart, they're very smart people. So they don't talk that much. Same with Airbus. The biggest customer of Airbus in the world is Indigo. The second biggest customer is Air India. So they make a lot of money. They won't talk about it. They won't go in the press and say, oh, India is great and everything. So I think for the French government and for the French companies, India is a good market to sell products because it's a country developing. And you see the European market is very flat. There is no growth in Europe. So now if you want, and as a company, you want to grow all the time, you need to find new markets. China is very difficult to crack. So India is the largest single market you can enter right now in the world. Let's be honest. So that's the thing. For the army, French army knows Indian army quite well. They are very allied. They did recently a Shakti exercise that was a success. And they have a very high esteem of the Indian army. The image of India is very, very great. And they always tell you like nice anecdotes. Like I have a friend, he was an officer in Lebanon. And there are some Indian soldiers there with UN. And he says like, what mesmerizes him every time is the fact that they have silverware in the military bases and they have white gloves. And the protocol in India is so... when they welcome another military officer, they say, I feel shameful because if you go to a French army base and you're invited, they just give you wine, but it will be very basic. Indians have this big protocol and everything. So that's, all of them notice that.
It's a different culture.
Yeah. After, if we talk about Intel, which is the thing I know the best, I would say, Indian was not very famous till recently. Because India intelligence is incredibly good, but it's really focused at the borders. Mostly like, I don't know, I don't have a number, but let's say 90% of their effort is managing things in the borders. You won't expect India to be the best country to do a coup d'etat in South America. If you want to change something, you will ask the British, the French, the American, the Israeli, the Russian, the Chinese. That's it. That's the few countries who can do such kind of operations, right? Indians don't, because they don't care. India, we are a nice country. We don't do this kind of stuff, everything. After, there is something we never realized in India, but the fact that we have an NSA, it's something extremely unique. I'm not saying we are the only country in the world to have that, but it's quite unique. In France, there are 6 secret services. They don't talk to each other. When they exchange information, it's a process by itself. There is not one person above the ecosystem who has basically, who can discuss about intelligence openly. And plus, he's very famous. He's very open. He's very, like it's someone you see on TV. He went to China, I think, last week to negotiate with the Minister of External Affairs of China. So that pattern is very unique, and I think it's very good. It's very good. The only downside of this pattern is if there is a problem with the person, the whole system is compromised. But I think the person we have right now is extremely talented, so it's not fine. But in the future, we need, when you have such a big responsibility, you need to be sure about the person.
Absolutely.
And in fact, something that France had unique was the special forces command operation. It's called the COS in French, Commandment of Special Operation. And India built that recently. In 2019, we have now a Commandment of Special Operations, which is under one roof with the Garud, the Marcos, the Para-SF, all of them being like top-notch, highest quality special forces recognized by everyone in the world. Badass guys. So that's quite different, I would say. After one thing I heard in the last 3 years, it's about cybersecurity. India was not seen much in cybersecurity. People knew we had IT engineers, but it was for CS, that kind of things. And I got people telling me in the last 2-3 years why India became really, really, really scary in terms of cybersecurity.
That's good to know.
Huge capacities. So good quality and good volume, like to do long operations all over the world for a long time.
I see.
And for example, a country like Israel, which is really, really good, now I think is really behind India.
Really?
By far.
Wow.
Because they are very good, but they don't have the volume we have. So everyone is really impressed by this capacity. After, again, I said the few problems that India has is the fact that it's really specialized, which is understandable. And it's a bit too much responsive. Not much action taken beforehand. It's not it's not very proactive. After, I think, and I can talk about my school later, the goal of my school in the French intelligence system was to have a porosity an exchange between the private sector and the intelligence sector.
Mm-hmm.
That never happened in India. Intel is very military police based. It's not really linked to the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really linked with the civilians.
Mm.
Something we are working on in Kutniti Foundation is to try to draft a strategy for India for its students.
Okay.
India had, before COVID, 6 lakhs students in the world.
Okay.
1.3 million today. So it
1.3
double, it more than double.
more than double.
And you had the COVID in the middle.
Yeah.
So in just basically 2 years, it doubled. Indians are known for one thing, but we could say the same thing with the Chinese maybe.
Yeah.
They are very smart students.
Mhm.
And they enter the best schools in the world.
Yes.
You go to Harvard, you go to MIT, you go to Oxford, you go to the INSEAD, you go to the best schools in the world, you'll see a lot of Indians.
Yes.
Not many countries can say the same thing,
Mhm.
right? If you are in Harvard and you are Russian or you are Chinese, before you go to school, you'll have some visits.
Mm.
Some people will come to you. They'll say there are some friends of your uncle that they know each other. They'll offer you lunch and they'll talk about what do you expect in Harvard? What will be your thing? They'll start to talk. And every time you'll come back from Harvard for holidays in the summer or whatever, they'll ask you some questions.
Mm.
They'll say, okay, who's in your class? Who's doing what? What's the father of this guy doing?
Mm.
What this guy wants to do? Who is having a girlfriend, boyfriend in the class? Who is doing drugs? And they can tell you that, for example, this person, you need to be friends with that person.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Mm.
Because they understand that if you take a batch of Harvard and you go 20 years forwards, they are the elites.
Yeah.
They'll be CEOs, senators, presidents of some countries from
Yeah.
all over the world. It's a
Mhm.
very, very powerful network. So we have this gold of these students that we send everywhere in the world, and we do nothing with it.
Mm.
And the huge Indian community we have and it's the richest community in the US and in
Yes.
the UK, is not helping us in almost any way, unfortunately.
Mm.
There are some individuals who do it because of patriotism,
Mhm.
but there is not a process of India to manage this community.
There's no process.
Yeah.
Mm. So what's your work like with the military school? What do you do there, and what is the school like?
So basically, it's very unique.
Mm.
To tell you a bit about the background of the school, in 1991, there was a prime minister of France. Her name was Edith Cresson.
Mhm.
And she had a very big problem to solve, which is the Cold War was over.
Mhm.
And during the Cold War was the absolute, apex of intelligence in the world. Like
Yes.
it was the golden era of intelligence. People, the budgets were no limit.
Mhm.
People were doing crazy stuff. It was absolutely mind-blowing. So in 1991, the Cold War is over. USSR falls. What do you do with these guys? So you have thousands of guys
Mm.
who speak Russians, who are protecting France from the US. And because France is West, but it's always not very straightforward. You know,
Yes.
like France is not at all an Anglo-Saxon country.
It's not at all.
So you have these people who are very smart, very
Mm.
expert, but they have no work to do.
Mm.
So what do you do with them? So she said, okay, let's do one thing. Let's ask ourselves, what is the future of intelligence in the
Mhm.
world? So she ordered a report. She hired 4 of the best experts of intelligence of France, one of them being Henri Martre. And they wrote a report, which is called the Martre Report. If you Google online, I think it's on the website of my school, you can find the report translated. It's 170 pages. It's very interesting to read.
Mhm.
And in these reports, basically in 1991, they answer the questions, what will be the future of intelligence in the next 30 years?
Mhm.
And on some topics, they are super, super smart.
Yeah.
Like, for example, they totally understood 30 years ago that the future will be online, that internet, at this time, internet was nothing,
Mhm.
that everyone will have internet. So the power of data, the power of all these things will be very, very, very interesting. And they did some mistakes. I'm not blaming them for that. It's a
Yeah.
very difficult exercise to do.
Mhm.
But taking in consideration that tech will be the future, they understood that the main threat for the world in the future would be Japan.
Japan. Okay.
Because at that time, Japan had a semiconductor industry.
Yes.
They had everything. They had the tech. They were doing robots. They didn't see China and South Korea and other countries coming.
I think a lot of people made that mistake at the time.
True.
Yeah.
We can talk about that later. I think
Mm.
a mistake that all intelligence services do all the time, decade after decade, is not being able to identify who's the enemy.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's a and India, I think, is doing this mistake right now.
I see. That's interesting.
So basically, they wrote that thing and they said, okay, how we can make things better, how we can prepare for that.
Mhm.
So they had multiple, action points.
Mhm.
And one of the action points is we should do a school. Okay, but we already have an intelligence school. Say, no. We'll do a school where we put the 6 services together.
I see.
And then they said, okay, we'll do one thing funny. we will put the private services inside also. So if you're someone from the private sector, you can also be a member of the school. You can attend the school. And something incredible, we can have foreigners.
Okay.
Selected countries. So there are a lot of blacklists, but they said, okay, there are some countries who are in the whitelist, like Italy or whatever. I was the first Indian to attend the school. So the school was started in 1998. I joined in the 2000. I was at the beginning of the school. And the school is in the military school area in Paris. No, it's an institution, I would say. It's a school which is funny because there is no window. There is not one single window. It's a bunker.
Okay.
Not one single window. So it's a bit oppressing there. And so I'm a professor there for 13 years. And all the elites of the French intel, private and public, comes out for this school.
So what do you teach?
Destabilization.
Destabilization. So how do you destabilize
narrative.
a country?
It's very easy. There are many, many ways. The French are known for the French theory. The way the French created the woke movement with a problem of time, I would say. They expected it to come a bit earlier. It was a weapon for the Cold War to destabilize US. But it just came right now, in fact, in the last few years.
Yes.
And it became out of control. You have multiple paradigms of intelligence in the world when you fight narratives. So, for example, the Americans, they are the best at one thing, which is they take the truth and they tweak the truth. And why they are smart is they don't tweak everything. Otherwise, people will notice. They'll tweak 1-2 things.
Very minor.
But they are the things that are important. And then they are good at maths. It's the country of Coca-Cola. It's McDonald's. They are good at mass intelligence.
Okay.
The French is a country, what's the most valued company in Europe? It's LVMH. It's Louis Vuitton. The richest man in Europe is Bernard Arnault, the owner of LV. So in India, we see fashion and everything as something futile, but it's a real massive business.
Okay.
And French are the best at that. All the luxury brands are owned by French brands. Even Gucci is owned by a French brand. So the mindset of the French is, it's not like mass marketing, it's scarcity marketing.
Scarcity marketing.
Yeah. And by the way, I can talk about that later, but French luxury companies have Intel services in-house.
I see.
Yeah, I train them.
Okay.
They have incredible. I'm more scared about a fashion brand in France, Secret Services, than some petrol companies.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
They are better. Yeah. Because the money they make out of it is higher.
Okay.
The way the French function is very different from the American. They take a system, and also because French have less money than the Americans, they try to find in the system one weakness, and they will press this weakness very, very, very strongly till the system breaks. So that's a very different mindset. So about the woke movement, the concept was how we can change the mindset of the Americans during the Cold War. And what they realized is it's very expensive. So if you want to do it with not too much budget, you change the universities. And then they said, okay, even touching all the universities is a task. So is there one place in the US where the universities are the nexus for all the others universities? And this city is San Francisco. San Francisco is not a very important city, but there are two things in San Francisco. There is the Silicon Valley, which is very important.
Yes.
And there is the mindset of US. Northern California gives the pace about what Americans should think, right? And when we change the universities, they will change the school programs, they will change the mindset and everything. And basically, they try to think that instead of having people fighting on left and right on an axis, which is money, which is we want more public services or more liberal, they say we will tweak that matrix and put left and right on minority fight about more futile things, which is about differences between people, not about a business thing. And it worked. And people will say, yeah, but Americans are very smart. They're not stupid. While they would eat that, and while the politicians in the US and not everyone in the world are happy to go fight on identity policies rather than business or, like social rights and everything. The reason is they found a weakness, the French found a weakness in the political system of democracies in the world, which is politicians, they just want to have hype. They just want to be elected. They just want to be popular.
Yeah.
Right. As a politician, anywhere in the world, in a democracy, if I want to fix a left-right issue, which is social, it's very difficult. I want to bring more investment in my country. That's a task. I need to make my country attractive for investors. It's very difficult. I want to fight on the left part. I want to fight unemployment. Very difficult.
Yes.
I need to create more jobs. It's very, very difficult.
It's hard work.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a dinner recently with a former president of France called François Hollande. He was the president just before Macron.
Yeah.
And basically he said, I'm known for one thing. He was 5 years in power in France. He was known for one thing. And basically he's a child of the system built by the French that went to the US and came back. He said, I had to do one thing to be popular in my whole thing. I legalize gay wedding.
Okay.
I don't care. It's not, are you pro or against that gay wedding? It's not the problem. It's just, it costs nothing to do.
Yeah.
You just sign one paper and you have an effect on the population.
Yes.
If the population thinks it's a good thing, you will be popular in 1 second. So all these policies is not about working really. It's just about validating something. If you create a law to have in your constituency somewhere that you have transgender bathroom, you'll be popular. If it's popular in your area, costs nothing to do and you have the merits. So politicians know it's a trap, but they go there because it's easy
It's
for
a
them.
vote. Yeah.
It's a vote bank.
So that's how the French compromised the US system and introduced wokeism there.
Yes.
Why did
It's called the
France
French
target?
theory.
But why did France target the US? I mean, the enemy was the USSR, right?
No.
So what's the dynamic between France and the US today, let's say?
I'll tell you something interesting. So in the 90s, the enemy was Japan.
Okay.
In the 2000s, when I was a student, it was China.
Okay.
We were trained against Chinese. If I was in the metro and I was seeing a Chinese person, I would have walked fast, turn, and be against the wall to let the person go in front of me. I was that scared of Chinese at this time.
Okay.
If just the Chinese people were coming close to the trash of the school, we are starting to think, like we were so trained to be scared of the Chinese.
Okay.
And at this time, China was nowhere in the world in terms of perception. No one cared about China in the 2000s. But the French intel was already, China will become very powerful. So they are very, very dangerous and everything.
Okay.
And 2-3 years ago, I was in France at the New Year welcoming of the professors. And the director of the school, who's a legend of French Secret Services, very strong guy, very tough guy, extremely smart and everything. I'm not talking about nobody. It's very someone important.
Yeah.
He did a speech. And he was, for the first time in my life, I know him for almost 20 years. For the first time of my life, he was a bit emotional.
Okay.
So someone with no emotion, right? And he said, I did a mistake. I trained generations of intel agents, of intel professionals, private and corporate, to be scared of China. We are 15 years after that time. Let's do the maths. What happened in 15 years in France due to China? What problems we had due to China? I can tell you. They bought some airports in France.
Okay.
They bought some vineyard. It's a free country. You can buy some vineyard if you want. And one thing a bit creepy they did, they married some very pretty Chinese women to high-ranked Navy officers of France.
Okay, that's concerning. Yeah.
Okay, that's one thing. Let's admit that. That was a problem. And then some basic low-level spying and everything, some ritual engineering of some products. That's the thing. So that's 15 years of what China created as problems in France. In the same time, US and Germany try to destroy Alstom. They destroyed Technip. They destroyed Lafarge. They tried to destroy Airbus. They wanted to remove the seat of United Nations of France to make it a European seat that would become German.
Okay.
Destroy the energy system of France, which was the best of the world. No, French has very expensive energy, while French is purely nuclear. It's the most nuclear country in the world. So
yes,
I can go to that list for 1 hour.
Okay.
So at the end, is China good? No, they are bad. They can create problems. But if you look honestly about the amount of issues they created in Europe in the last 15 years, it's nothing compared to our friends.
Okay.
I don't blame them for that. They're very smart.
Fine. Yeah.
Europe is not a democracy. France is not a democracy because it's a technocracy controlled by Europe. If you go to Brussels, where there is a headquarters of Europe, you have more American lobbyists than European lobbyists.
That's interesting.
There are more people who are lobbying for Microsoft than any German or Polish or Spanish company. So I think it's very important to know who's your enemy at some point. And I think in India, we're also doing some mistakes here. We are too much focused on our neighbors. Not saying they are good. They are creating issues and everything. And it's visible. You see it's your border. You're not comfortable with that. But we have also other enemies. That are less visible. Yeah.
Oh, India has had problems with the nation with various Western nations.
Yeah.
Now, you spoke about intelligence operations and all that. So if you want to, let's say, hypothetically carry out some kind of operation in a foreign country, let's say you want to take out a bad guy, how would you do it? What are the ways of doing that?
There are multiple ways to do it. I will talk in a general sense.
Yes.
And I won't talk about what India has at its border, because you can cross the border, do something, and come back.
Yeah,
I'm
that's a
not talking
different
about that.
scenario.
Let's say it's a bit more far.
Far.
You know, like it's more far.
Mhm.
So there are 5 ways to do it, to take someone out outside as a government. And I will give you the pro and cons, if you want, for each of them.
Okay.
So the first one is you negotiate with the target country. You talk to their government and you say, listen, let's do a deal. There is one guy on your soil. I'm not very fine with him. I would like him to sleep for a good time.
Okay.
Can you arrange that for me? There is a very famous operation that the French carried in the 90s for British.
Okay.
There was a very famous British person who was on the French soil, and she got managed by the French services.
I see.
When you are asked to do that, you're so happy, because then the country has something, you know, like you can have something.
Yes.
So there is one pro in this system when you just ask the country is it's managed. They'll do it. They have the law. They have everything. They know to manage in their own country. It will be perfectly managed. That's fine. You have 2 issues. The first issue is you will owe them something.
Yes.
You ask a favor, no, you will need to do it also.
Yeah.
Maybe you're fine with it, but you know, after it's going to be difficult to say, okay, you did it for me, I won't do it for you. So you have this thing. And the second thing is if they say no. Because if they say no, I can't for XYZ reasons, then they absolutely know what you want to do.
Yes.
So you disclose yourself. You need to be very smart when you discuss with another country for that. It's an art by itself. Then the second technique is you have your own units. So you have the army, you have special forces, and you have something above that. You have other units above that who can carry clandestine operations. So they are like special forces, but in civilian. And they can go in other countries and treat people. Right? It works very, very well, but it's a hell of a process. It's a budget. It's an organization you need to do and everything. And if one day you're cooked, and if you look at France, just on Wikipedia, you can find one very famous example where France was doing it.
Okay.
In the Oceanian region.
I know.
You know this story.
I know, yes.
Then it's decades and decades of embarrassment.
Yes.
But that's a system that works otherwise quite well. And there are some countries who don't care about their perception. There is one country, the Near East, who does that every single day. Every year, the Americans say, please take back your guys. You know, like I don't want them to run around in my country. But that's the system. Then there is a third layer that not many countries have. France has it. Many countries in Europe has it. Is you have dormant cells.
Okay.
So basically, you have people all over the world that are not at all. So the second type is like, imagine elite special forces. Guys who are strong, they know every weapon, they know to fight, they know everything. They are like, like Swiss knife of fighting and everything. This third category, they are not like this at all. They are Mr. Nobody, Mrs. Nobody. They live in a country somewhere. They are not trained to very high fighting. They are under the radar. They have a corporate job, 9 to 5 and everything but they work for you.
Okay.
And you hold them with money, you have something against them. They want to hide something or whatever. So you control those people. Or they do it by pure patriotism. That's also possible. Countries like China are very good at this because they have a diaspora everywhere in the world.
Yes.
And they are very linked to their motherland. India also can, to some extent, are like this. So we should maybe use that a bit more. And basically, you will say to that person who's maybe a 50-year-old woman, okay, for 10 years, she will have nothing to do. She'll just have her life. And one day you'll say, okay, you go to that train station. You'll find an umbrella somewhere. You'll take the umbrella. You walk behind this person and you just put the tip of the umbrella on the calf of the person when the person is walking. There will be a needle putting something inside the body system of the person and the person will be gone.
Okay.
You go back home and you take back your life and we'll never contact you again. Okay. So that's a very good system. After, again, the process, you need to have people. You need to think decades in advance to have these people implanted. It's a budget, it's a whatever thing. And these people just know one people in your system. Like special forces, they are brothers. They live together, they eat together, they fight together. They know a lot of people in the system. Those guys, you can only have one person who know them.
One handler.
So in fact, they don't know the rest of the system.
Yes.
So even if they talk or whatever,
they can't
they have no clue. They cannot talk much. And the person who will come to them will be very vague and everything. So that's a good system. Then the fourth category is private. So you go private. There are private companies in the world who are doing that. I'm not talking about PMCs, like private military companies, not about Wagner Group or Sadat. Sadat is the Turkish, very, very powerful. We should make a video about them.
Okay.
They are very, very strong. And in Armenia, they can be a challenge for India in the long run.
I see.
but smart guys. So I'm not talking about these proprietary companies. There are other companies who appear as big companies sometimes, who are doing security, who are doing, like crisis management and everything. And they have in-house some people you can outsource that for money, basically.
Okay.
And it can go quite far. I can give you an example. I have a schoolmate. He was in school with me. And that guy, he had a specialty. He was working for a private agency. And how to picture it properly? They were paid by a country in the world to protect Gaddafi.
Okay.
When he was moving outside Libya.
I see.
Gaddafi was very strong in his own country. He was managing the police very well, but he was the king of all the kings of Africa. So he was moving in Africa a lot. He wanted to create a currency for all Africa. That's why he's not with us anymore.
Yeah.
And few other problems. One was with mobile phone. He wanted to have an operator for mobiles all over Africa. He has 3-4 things that made him, not a good friend anymore, I would say. And but when he was outside Libya, he didn't know to take care of people. He didn't know to ensure his own security. He didn't know to ensure his own logistics and everything. So he had an agreement with a foreign country. And this foreign country said, okay, I cannot send my soldiers with their uniform. The one will know. So they were paying a private company.
I see.
My friend was managing that. And when he was traveling or when he wanted something to be done in Africa, he was managed by those guys.
I see. I see.
So very efficient, cost money, but it's money you pay for only one mission. So it's quite efficient, I would say. So that's also a system that works quite well. And then the fifth way, I don't like the fifth way. It's you rely on local thugs, local mafias, local guys or whatever.
That's not smart.
And it's not the best way to do it. The first reason why it's not smart to do it is these guys are under heavy surveillance.
Yeah.
So you're basically trying to give a missions to a guy who's like, the local police is looking at him all the time.
Yeah.
So it's the opposite of the third category where you have someone who's totally, invisible in the society. And these guys are not reliable. They have ego. They have their own agenda. There is one maybe category inside that. I mentioned the second category, which is special forces who fight in civilians. There are some guys of the second category who go rogue.
Okay.
They leave their organizations and they start a small group between 6 to 20 people. They fought together for years, so they are extremely efficient. And now they are okay to do it for money.
Okay.
Out of all the guys I met in my life, the most scary people I met in my life are these people.
I see.
Rogue takers. Like people who are takers and they go rogue. The problem with these groups is they change all the time. They disband. They do sometimes mission for 4 or 5 years, then they have enough money and they retire and everything.
Okay.
Yeah. So for example, me, when I was in this war, there was 2 groups in France and none of them exist anymore.
I see.
So basically, I don't even know which is the best group in this country today and everything. It's a task to know who's doing what. It's very secret. So you need to have access to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned that India should have its own foreign legion.
Yeah.
France has the Légion étrangère, right?
Yeah.
So how do you go about doing that? Have you proposed this to the government?
I'm prepared. I know, I don't want to come with something which is just an idea. I want to have a plan. I'm an operational guy. I'm not like a think tank person who writes a report and that. So for people who don't know much about the Foreign Legion, if you go to any police station in France, anywhere in France, and you go to a police officer and you say, I want to disappear in the Legion, they'll manage you. So you'll have a meeting and then you go to a building and persons will say, okay, now you will tell me everything about your life for the last time, and then we'll forget everything.
Okay.
So you can be from any background in the world. You have people who are child soldiers. You have people who are narcos. You have people who are just... I met a guy, he was Irish. His girlfriend left him. The guy said, okay, I have 2 options. I put a bullet in my head, or I could join the Legion. Wow. Fantastic soldier. Big guy, everything, yeah. You have a bit of people who just fight. They want to leave poverty, people who want adventure. So you find a mix of very eclectic people from all over the world.
So you can be of any nationality.
Yeah, that's the concept. It's a foreign legion. So basically, you will fight for the French army, but being from anywhere in the world.
Okay.
And then if you pass the exams and everything, you're sent to Guyana. People tend to forget that, but France is not a country in Europe. It's a country all over the world. It's a country in the world with the most time zones. It's the country in the world with the most water zones. what we call EEZ. You see, economic zone on the water.
Yeah.
And the largest border of France with another country is with Brazil.
With Brazil.
Yeah. It's not with a European country. The longest border of France is with Brazil.
Okay.
So in Guyana, where there is the French space program, it's where because it's on the equator line.
Yeah.
That's where the Legion trains.
I would say.
And your train over there, and the training is very difficult. They will break you mentally to the level of because they don't deal with young people who are fresh. They deal with people who have a past.
Okay.
So they'll break you to the last level, but it's at the level where your colonel can pee on the floor and ask you to drink his pee. Yeah. And they'll break you till the end. You will live 5 years over there, and then they'll build you again from scratch. And so they are very, very strong soldiers. Many wars fought by NATO, they are in the front line. The advantage of the Legion is you gather a lot of very loyal soldiers from all over the world. And then after, I forgot, you get a French passport. You have a new name, a new identity. And if tomorrow, let's say you're from XYZ country, and this country comes to the French government and said, is that guy inside your country? Yes. I'm busy, I'm drinking wine, so come next week.
Okay.
They won't know.
Okay.
Like they'll manage that you
manage
disappear. Yeah. So I think the good thing for India would be one thing that India lacks is physics. So India, we have different physics. We have a range of physics. We are not a country where everyone looks the same. We have a range, but still we don't have a lot of like blonde people.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of African-looking people and everything.
Yeah.
So if you do that, you attract a lot of those people that you can use after in other services. You have a network of profiles, which is interesting, and it costs nothing to have. So basically, what I want to do right now is I know people who are ex-Legion who have the whole process, and basically work with them to give it to India. And it would be unique to have another country who has a Legion. Spain has a very small Legion.
I see.
Yeah, Spain. It's not very known. It's not very big. But India should be the process is very good. And from Napoleon era, it was there.
So would France be willing to help India in this matter?
Yeah.
You're mentioning the Olympics.
Yeah.
So India is bidding for the 2036 Olympics, right?
True.
And you were involved in the process.
Yeah.
So what is the situation like?
You need to understand that Olympic Games, there are two parts. There is one part where you organize the games, you build stadiums, you increase your hotel capacity and all that. I have no clue about that.
That's after winning the bid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before that, it's a bid. It's a competition. You have 6-7 countries around a big cake, and only one of them will get the cake, right? And you're fighting against very different countries. We fight against Turkey right now and Qatar, for example, who are the two most serious competitors for India for this game, right? And Qatar got the last World Cup of football.
Yes.
So it's a kind of public diplomacy competition. It's not about how you build stadium. It's how you create a narrative on your country, why I should get the games and not him.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you need to identify all the stakeholders, and then how you apply, an input on those stakeholders that they'll be on your side. Okay. You don't need to have 100% of them. You need to have more than the others. Simple. So that's what we are trying to do right now. The problem in India is India never organized any major events of sports except cricket.
Yeah.
We talk about the Commonwealth game. No one in the world knows what is the Commonwealth game. No one cares about it. And it was a long time ago, and it was not a huge success.
It was not. It was right here.
It was just there. We should not even talk about that.
We should not.
Right? And also India is not very strong in sports. We don't have a lot of medals and everything. There are very small countries who have medals.
So how do you win the bid? Stakeholders.
So I made a few of my students last year work on that, and I would need to give them credit for that because they did a fantastic job. And I have one friend also who's part of one of the largest companies of India who helped me on that. And so we wrote the whole strategy for India. But the problem is now for the Indian government, and I don't want to say anything wrong about them or anything here, it's something new for them. So they need to understand that it goes much beyond what they think. And I met few of them, and they realized when I met them, the meeting was a bit weird because they were like, okay, we never thought about it, about this thing. I'll give you an example. Everyone understands that the vote is by a member of Olympic Committee. That's the ones who vote, but they are not the only stakeholders.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. The sponsors.
The sponsors.
It's a business at the end. The people who decide are the sponsors. Who are the sponsors? Blizzard, Omega, Airbnb. They are like mostly foreign companies.
Yes.
Who have a say, about that. So you need to have a strategy for them to make them understand that basically India, for their business, is a better market than Qatar.
Or Turkey.
Small population, that's easy. They're the federations, the federation of sports. So let's remove football, they don't really care, but all the other federations of volleyball or athleticism or swimming, everything, their metric is after the games, I want to have more people who have a member card of my sport. That's their metric, basically.
Okay.
So you can tell them that India is a better thing for them and prove them that. You need to bring numbers, you need to invite them, you need to do a tour of all the directors of federations, of all the main sports in the world to come to India and everything and do something fancy, not to meet some MPs and everything, but to really enjoy India and understand the potential of India and all that.
Yeah.
So there are multiple layers. You need to create a narrative. I'll give you an example. One of the biggest narrative I work on, and we build a full story here, it's really writing a story. It's not anything fake, it's totally true. It's about how you tackle the fact that India is very weak in terms of sports medal in Olympic Games. We don't have a lot of medals.
We don't.
So any country can say, yes, but me, I have more medals than you. You don't know anything about sports. It's very difficult to attack. So I found a solution. And I told that to some people. I tried these arguments and it worked fantastically well. The DNA of Olympic Games, and Olympic Games were built by France. In the whole time, it was Greece, but it was revised by France 100 years ago.
Yeah.
It's for amateurism.
Yes.
It's not for superstars. It's for amateurs. It's for common person. In India, we thrive when we saw one soldier who threw a javelin and became a champion. The fact that he was not a mega star with a big system behind him, but he was a common man. I have cousins who are in the Indian army. So that's the beauty of Olympic Games, is when you see these common women, these common men who become, like successful, they are in the lights, they were not known 1 hour before and they become known and everything. That's the beauty of that. And if you talk to the federations, they tell you one thing. There are few federations I will keep outside, football and cricket, for example, maybe basketball in the US. But most of the federations, they are tired of superstars. Because if you look at a guy who's super successful, he has a machine behind him, you can never identify to that guy. So basically, we need to bring back amateurism inside the games. And all the federations, again, outside football maybe, they want to push that. There are already enough events in tennis, in football with superstars to have an event with amateurs. And India can be a new, paradigm in the Olympic Games and take a break from the over-professionalism of the games.
Right. So when you were part of the process in France, what was the strategy or the narrative that you had constructed at that time?
No, that was something different. France is a different country. Okay, you have 3 types of country who can organize the games.
Okay.
You have one type of country is countries who do games all the time.
Okay.
France, UK, US.
All the
time.
time.
3 main one, but there are some. Every year in France, there is a football World Cup, Olympic Games, Rugby World Cups, there is tennis. So for those countries, making games is very good because you already spend the capex for the game years ago. It was paid by your ancestors.
Yeah.
And you just bring more people and you can make money out of it, right? The second type of countries are countries who have nothing and they build things for the games and it's unused after.
Just one time use.
Think about Brazil, think about Sochi in Russia, think about Athens in Greece.
Yeah.
It's not a very good thing.
Yeah.
Olympic Games is not always a good thing. Sometimes it's a disaster. You spend a lot of money and you never recover your money.
I see.
And then there is a third category, which is you have nothing, you build things and you keep it after, you use it and everything. I have one good example for that is China in 2008, right?
Yeah.
They had nothing. In the 90s, they won the build. And in 2008, that's the year people said, oh, China is something. People realized in 2008, like the games for China was in their history a change.
Yeah.
People realized this country exists and can execute something. It brought them billions and billions after. And the stadiums and the infrastructure they built are used till today.
Even now, yeah.
So it's a very good investment.
Yes.
I think India is the only other country in the world who can be a second China. We can build stuff and use it for ourselves. We have a huge problem in India of healthcare. People are not fit. People, so I think even only for the health of our citizens, it's a good thing to have the games. So when you are in the first category, you don't really have much to convince about your capacity to organize the games. So when you are in this position, your strategy is more to attack the others. That's why you involve people like me more than sports people. Because then what you need to do, and India needs to do the same thing, is to use, we have in this building some of those capacity. You have open source intelligence agents with screens and everything. And they monitor what other countries are doing. You try to find some weaknesses in other candidates, and then you push, like this weakness, and you try to amplify it. You are more in the attack than the defense of yourself. India needs to do both.
Okay.
Because we are in the third category, so we need to prove to the world that we can do the game, that we merit the game, and at the same time we need to fight the others. And we are not doing any of these three things.
So the government of India does want to get the games. Yeah. It's pretty clear that they want to.
Yeah. I think both the Ambani family and the central government of India was very clear about it. They decided to do it in Ahmedabad.
So very serious about it.
Yeah. I think it's a good choice to take Ahmedabad. Remember one thing, the games are in the whole country.
Yeah.
The game happened in Paris just a few months ago. Some events were in Pacific Ocean for surfing in Tahiti. Some events were in north of France, some stuff were in Marseille. You just need one title city, which is the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony and things, but you can have games in Ahmedabad and have one thing in Mumbai, one thing in Bangalore, one thing in wherever you want, I'm from Varanasi, I would hope to have something in Varanasi, a beautiful city. It can be everywhere, but you just need one title city, and I think for that, Ahmedabad is good because it's a bit empty. We can still build stuff around. It's not too cramped like Mumbai or Delhi.
Yeah.
And they know to execute.
So what are the kind of topics you're going to be talking about in the videos that you make for the channel? What are the topics that interest you?
One thing I realized in India is, and I love India for that, it's a bit of a naive country. It's a nice country because we don't do harm to the rest of the world.
We don't.
We are very peaceful, and I think it's fantastic. I love that, and I'm happy to be back in India. After I grew up in France, but I'm back in India for the last, 14 years, something like this. I love that. The problem is the other countries don't behave the same way.
Yes.
When you are a small country in the corner of the world, no one cares about you, you're fine. But if you start to become, in 2 years will be the third power in the world, you start to have ambitions, some people won't be very happy with that.
Yes.
So then you start to attract negativity, I would say. And you need to protect yourself from that. So what I want to do in the videos is to give to people in India, not the solution, but the tools to understand these dynamics, some mind tool to understand the world, to understand psychological warfare, the war narratives, destabilization of nations.
Right. So I look forward to the videos that you make. And I'm sure that the audience will really enjoy that.
Yeah, for sure. We'll publish soon.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.